Back home, there's been a record number of illicit drug seizures over the last 12 months, according to Australian Crime Commission figures. At around 70,000, it's the most in a decade. And just this morning, police seized nearly $300,000 worth of drugs in Sydney's east. Well, Paul Jevtovic is the Executive Director of the Australian Crime Commission. He says the figures show police are getting better at catching drug criminals.
The 9.3 tonnes that have been seized and that we reference in the report are seizures that occur all over the country. Seizures by state and territory police forces, by the Australian Customs Service at the border and by the Australian Federal Police, and in task forces made up of all those agencies right across the country.
There may be a record number of seizures over the last year, but is that having a real effect on the street?
I think it does, because those seizures mean that is 9.3 tonnes of narcotics, of illicit drugs, that are not hitting the streets, that there are no victims as a result of those drugs being trafficked. So I think that's an important point. The other issues, of course, are that the money that the 9.3 tonnes of illicit drugs would have generated for these organised crime syndicates hasn't been realised. So I think from those two perspectives, it is extremely successful and it has had a dent.
What do you make of calls for an overhaul of the whole drugs policy in Australia, that the war against drugs is being lost and that police time is better spent doing other things rather than trying to track down drugs, the most common of which, as you have said, is cannabis?
Well, first of all, Ros, I think any debate in this country about a challenge like illicit drugs is healthy, but I think law enforcement's demonstrated, and the data in this report supports the fact that we are having some significant success. But I think what is really important is the holistic approach that Australia's taking. It is not just about law enforcement, it's about educating, it's about demonstrating to our youth of today the risks in taking these illicit drugs, the fact that we don't know quite often what is in these illicit drugs, and some of the evidence the report references is substances that are used to deworm cattle and sheep. This is chemicals that our youth are putting into their system. So education has to be, I think, at the forefront of the response. But that said, conducted and intelligence-led policing, I think, is having a significant impact. And I should also note the report talks about seizures here in Australia. What it doesn't actually reflect is the amount of very good work offshore being done by Australian law enforcement in stopping drugs at the source countries.
Paul Jevtovic, thank you.
Thank you, Ros.